What if 3 American coins, sitting quietly in a collection, could be worth far more than their face value? One is the 1972 Kennedy half-dollar. One is the 2000 Sacagawea $1, and the third is the 1983 Washington quarter. At first glance, they may look like ordinary coins that millions of people have handled over the years. But when you look closer, things can get much more interesting. The 1972 Kennedy half-dollar carries the portrait of John F. Kennedy and comes from an important period in American coin history. The 2000 Sacagawea dollar is even more intriguing because it represents the beginning of a completely new dollar coin design in the United States. And then we have the 1983 Washington quarter, a coin that may look common, but certain varieties, errors, and condition levels can make specific examples much more desirable to collectors. But here's the question: could one of these 3 coins have a detail that most people would completely overlook? A small mint mark, an unusual strike, doubling, a rare variety, or another tiny difference could change the story of a coin. So before you spend, sell, or simply put these coins away, take a closer look, because today we're going to examine all 3 coins, uncover their history, look at the details collectors search for, and find out whether any of these coins could be worth more than you might expect. The coin that survived more than 50 years. Imagine a small coin sitting quietly in an old drawer for decades. Nobody pays attention to it. People open the drawer, move things around, and close it again. Years pass, and the coin remains exactly where it was left. Then one day someone picks it up. At first it looks like an ordinary 50-cent piece. There is a familiar face on the front, a large American eagle on the back, and the date 1972 at the bottom. Nothing seems unusual. It is just another old Kennedy half-dollar. But when you turn a coin like this over and start looking closely, you realize that it is not simply a piece of metal. It is a small object that has traveled through American history. How the Kennedy half-dollar began. To understand this 1972 coin, we have to go back to the beginning of the Kennedy half-dollar story. The Kennedy half-dollar was introduced in 1964, shortly after President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in November 1963. The United States Mint moved quickly to create a circulating coin honoring the president. Gilroy Roberts created Kennedy's portrait for the obverse, while Frank Gasparo designed the reverse. The result became one of the most recognizable American coin designs ever produced. The first Kennedy half-dollar was made from 90% silver, which is one reason the early 1964 issue is especially popular with collectors. But the story changed over the following years. From silver to clad coinage, Kennedy half dollars dated from 1965 through 1970 used a 40% silver composition. Then, beginning in 1971, regular Kennedy half-dollars changed to a copper-nickel clad composition. That brings us to our 1972 Kennedy half-dollar. This is an important detail, because many people see an old Kennedy half-dollar and automatically think it must contain silver. A normal 1972 circulation Kennedy half-dollar is not a 90% silver coin. Instead, it belongs to the clad era of the series. So the date alone does not make this coin extremely valuable. To understand its potential collector value, we have to look much deeper. What happened to this coin in 1972? Think about this coin when it was brand new. In 1972, nobody would have called it an antique. It was simply money. Someone could have received it as change in a store. Another person might have carried it in a pocket. It could have passed through banks, cash registers, restaurants, vending machines, and countless people's hands. Maybe someone saved it because they liked Kennedy. Maybe it was placed in a jar with other coins. Maybe it was spent dozens of times. We will probably never know. But the coin itself survived. And more than 50 years later, someone is holding it again and asking an important question. Is there anything special about this particular coin? Looking closely at Kennedy's portrait. On the front of the coin, we see Kennedy facing left. Above his portrait is Liberty. Across the lower area is In God We Trust. And underneath the portrait is the date 1972. These details are important because they confirm exactly what coin we are looking at. But collectors don't stop at the date. They examine the condition of the entire coin. Kennedy's hair, face, neck, and other raised details can show wear after years of circulation. Scratches and contact marks can also appear across the surface. A heavily circulated coin can look very different from an example that has been carefully preserved. the tiny mint mark that collectors look for. One of the smallest details on a Kennedy half-dollar can sometimes be one of the most important. Look near Kennedy's neck on the obverse. This is where the mint mark can be found on coins from this period. A small D indicates production at the Denver Mint. While coins produced at Philadelphia may have no mint mark, this tiny letter can easily be missed without good lighting or magnification. For a collector, however, that tiny letter can provide important information about the coin's origin, the interesting 1972 D no FG variety. Now we come to one of the most interesting aspects of the 1972 Kennedy half-dollar. Collectors know about a variety called the 1972 D no FG Kennedy half-dollar. The letters FG represent Frank Gasparro, the designer of the reverse. His initials normally appear on the reverse near the eagle. On certain 1972 D Kennedy half-dollars, those initials are missing or dramatically reduced. That is why collectors pay special attention to this area. But there is an important warning. If you cannot see the FG initials clearly, that does not automatically mean you have a rare no FG variety. Where lighting, weak strikes, scratches, photography, and other factors can make tiny details difficult to see. A suspected variety should always be properly compared with reliable references. The American eagle on the reverse. Turn the coin over and the design changes completely. The reverse shows a large American eagle with its wings spread wide. The eagle holds an olive branch in one claw and arrows in the other. Above the eagle is E pluribus unum. Around the design are stars, while United States of America appears around the upper portion. At the bottom are the words half-dollar. This powerful design was created by Frank Gasparro and became one of the most recognizable reverse designs in modern American coinage. Why the condition of the coin matters. Imagine two 1972 Kennedy half-dollars sitting next to each other. Both have the same date. Both are genuine. Both are clad coins. But one has scratches, worn details, and heavy circulation. The other has sharp details, attractive surfaces, and very little evidence of handling. They may have very different collector appeal. This is why condition matters so much. Collectors carefully examine the surfaces, high points, lettering, and overall appearance of a coin. A coin that has survived in exceptional condition can be much more interesting than an ordinary circulated example. Never clean an old coin. There is one mistake that new collectors should avoid. Do not clean a potentially collectible coin. Someone may find an old Kennedy half-dollar and think, "This coin looks dirty. I'll make it shiny." They might use polish, chemicals, toothpaste, or an abrasive material that can damage the original surface. A shiny coin is not automatically a valuable coin. In fact, an improperly cleaned coin can be less desirable to collectors. If you think your 1972 Kennedy half-dollar may be interesting, handle it carefully by the edges and leave the surface alone. Is that mark really a mint error? Another common mistake is assuming every unusual mark is an error. A scratch is not automatically a mint error. A dent is not automatically a mint error. Damage from circulation is not automatically a mint error. A genuine mint error happens during the manufacturing process. Examples of genuine errors on U.S. coins can include major off-center strikes, clipped planchets, wrong planchet errors, and other recognized production mistakes. So if something looks unusual on your coin, the important question is, did it happen at the mint or did it happen after the coin entered circulation? That difference can completely change the coin's collector interest. What is the 1972 Kennedy half-dollar actually worth? This is the question most people want answered. The honest answer is that there is no single value for every 1972 Kennedy half-dollar. A normal circulated example is generally not a fortune coin. Its face value is 50 cents, and ordinary examples may have only a modest collector premium depending on condition and market demand. However, a high-grade example, recognized variety, or genuine mint error can be more desirable. The 1972 D no FG variety is one of the reasons collectors pay special attention to certain examples from this year, but it is important to avoid exaggerated claims. Not every 1972 Kennedy half-dollar is worth thousands or millions of dollars. A spectacular auction price for an exceptional coin does not mean every coin with the same date has the same value. How to check your own coin. If you have a 1972 Kennedy half-dollar, start with the date. Confirm that it actually says 1972. Then look near Kennedy's neck and check for the mint mark. After that, turn the coin over. Study the eagle. Look carefully around the area where the FG initials should appear. Then examine the condition. Look for scratches, dents, heavy wear, unusual surfaces, or other characteristics. A magnifying glass and good lighting can make this process much easier. Why this coin is still worth collecting. Even if your 1972 Kennedy half dollar turns out to be a normal example, that doesn't make it worthless as a collectible. It is still part of the Kennedy half dollar story. It represents the period after the series moved away from the silver composition used in earlier years. It carries a design connected to one of the most recognizable presidents in American history, and it has survived more than 5 decades. That alone makes it an interesting piece of history. The story hidden inside a small coin. The most fascinating thing about an old coin is often the story we don't know. We know this coin was produced in 1972. We know the design. We know the composition. We can examine its condition. But we don't know who held it first. We don't know how many stores it traveled through. We don't know how many pockets it sat in. We don't know when someone decided to save it. And we don't know how it eventually ended up in your collection. That's what makes old coins special. They survive while the world around them changes. Final thoughts about the 1972 Kennedy half dollar. The 1972 Kennedy half dollar is not automatically a rare fortune coin, and it should not be presented that way. But it is absolutely worth examining. Check the date. Check the mint mark. Study Kennedy's portrait. Turn the coin over. Examine the eagle. Look closely at the FG area. Study the condition. And never clean the coin before you know what you have. Because sometimes the difference between an ordinary coin and an interesting collectible can be hidden in one tiny detail. A small mint mark, a rare variety, an unusual strike, an exceptional grade, or a genuine mint error. So the next time you see a 1972 Kennedy half dollar, don't just see 50 cents. Look at the history. Look at the details. And remember that this little coin has already survived more than half a century. Its journey began in 1972, and somehow after all these years its story has ended up in your hands. A coin that looked different from everything before it. Imagine finding an unusual golden-colored dollar coin in an old collection. You pick it up and immediately notice that it doesn't look like the traditional silver-colored American dollar coins you have seen before. The surface has a warm golden appearance, and on the front there is the portrait of a woman with a young child. The date says 2000. Near the date is a small P mint mark. At first it might look like an ordinary dollar coin, but this particular coin is actually part of an important chapter in modern American coin history. This is the 2000 P Sacagawea Dollar, one of the first-year coins of a completely new dollar series, introduced by the United States Mint at the beginning of the new millennium. And although millions of these coins were produced, the story behind them is much more interesting than simply saying that they are worth $1. To understand why collectors still examine these coins today, we have to go back to the beginning. The woman on the coin. The first thing that catches your attention is the woman on the front. Her name is Sacagawea, the famous Lemhi Shoshone woman associated with the Lewis and Clark expedition. She is shown carrying her young son Jean-Baptiste on her back. The portrait was designed by artist Glenna Goodacre, and the design was selected for the new dollar coin. This was an important moment for American coinage because the United States was putting the image of a Native American woman on a circulating dollar coin. The design was meant to recognize Sacagawea's historical role and her connection to one of the most famous journeys in American history. The date 2000 appears on the obverse, along with the inscription Liberty and the motto, In God We Trust. And then there is that small letter, P. That little P tells us something important. It means this particular coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. Why 2000 is so important? The date 2000 makes this coin especially interesting because it is the first year of the Sacagawea Dollar series. Think about what that means. Before 2000, this exact design did not exist in American circulation. The United States Mint was preparing to introduce a completely new dollar coin. The country was entering a new millennium. The public was excited about the year 2000, and at the same time, the Mint was trying to create a dollar coin that could become a practical part of everyday American life. The result was the Sacagawea Dollar. So when you hold a 2000 example, you are holding a first-year issue. It represents the beginning of an entirely new chapter. Why did the coin have a golden color? One of the first things people notice about a Sacagawea dollar is its color. It looks golden. But there is an important misunderstanding that needs to be cleared up. The coin is not made of solid gold. Its golden appearance comes from its special manganese brass-clad composition. The outer layers and core use a combination of copper, zinc, manganese, and nickel. This gave the coin its distinctive golden color while keeping the manufacturing cost far below what a solid gold coin would require. The United States Mint wanted something visually different. The idea was that people would be able to recognize the new dollar quickly, and that golden appearance became one of the most recognizable characteristics of the Sacagawea dollar. The story behind the new dollar. When the Sacagawea dollar was being developed, the United States already had a long history of dollar coins. There had been silver dollars. There had been Eisenhower dollars. There had been Susan B. Anthony dollars, but the Susan B. Anthony dollar had struggled to gain widespread public acceptance. It was similar in size and color to the quarter, and many people confused the two coins. The mint wanted the new dollar to be different. It needed to stand out. It needed to be recognizable, and it needed a design that could capture public attention. The golden color was one answer. The new Sacagawea design was another, a new face for American coinage. The choice of Sacagawea was significant. Her story was connected to the Lewis and Clark expedition, which began in 1804. Sacagawea traveled with the expedition while carrying her infant son. Her knowledge of the land, languages, and regional cultures was valuable to the expedition. Her presence also had symbolic importance. A woman traveling with a young child helped communicate a peaceful appearance in encounters with different Native American communities. The exact details of her life remain the subject of historical discussion, and much of what is popularly told about her comes from a combination of historical records and later interpretations, but her name had become strongly connected with the Lewis and Clark expedition. And in 2000, that name appeared on a new American dollar coin, the portrait you see today. Look carefully at the coin shown here. Sacagawea is facing forward. Her expression is calm. Her young son is visible behind her. The design is very different from the portraits of presidents that appear on many American coins. Instead of showing a famous political leader, the coin presents a historical Native American woman. This gave the new dollar a completely different identity. The word liberty curves around the top. The motto "In God We Trust" appears on the obverse, and the date 2000 appears toward the right side. The small p indicates Philadelphia. Every one of these details helps identify the coin. The reverse was completely different. Now turn the coin over. The reverse is one of the most beautiful parts of the design. Instead of a traditional building, portrait, or shield, we see a large American eagle flying across the coin. Stars surround the eagle. The words United States of America appear around the outer edge, and the denomination is represented by $1. The eagle was designed by sculptor and engraver Thomas D. Rogers Sr. The design was intended to create a strong connection with American national identity. The eagle is one of the most recognizable symbols of the United States, so the coin combines two very different images. Sacagawea represents a historical individual connected to Native American history and the Lewis and Clark expedition. The eagle represents the United States itself. Together, they create a very distinctive dollar coin, the coin that was supposed to change everyday money. When the Sacagawea dollar was introduced, there were hopes that it would become a successful circulating dollar. The mint wanted people to actually use it. The coin was designed to be durable. It was a different color from other circulating coins, and it had a distinctive smooth edge. The idea was simple: make the dollar easy to recognize, make it durable, and encourage Americans to use dollar coins more frequently. But changing people's habits is never easy. Americans were already comfortable using paper $1 bills. Many people preferred the familiar dollar bill to carrying a heavier dollar coin. So although the Sacagawea dollar became a familiar collectible and was produced in large numbers, it did not completely replace the $1 bill in everyday American life. The first year 2000p coin. This brings us back to your coin. The 2000p is a first-year Philadelphia issue. Large numbers were produced. So an ordinary circulated example is not automatically rare. This is extremely important when discussing value. The coin's age alone does not make it extremely valuable. There are many 2000 Sacagawea dollars because the mint produced them in large quantities. But that doesn't mean every 2000p coin is exactly the same. Collectors know that certain varieties and special Characteristics can make individual examples much more interesting. And this is where the story becomes much more exciting. The famous Cheerios dollar. One of the most fascinating stories connected with the 2000 Sacagawea dollar is the Cheerios dollar. Before the Sacagawea dollar officially entered widespread circulation, some 2000p examples were placed into specially prepared Cheerios cereal boxes as part of a promotional campaign. Thousands of these coins were distributed in the promotion. At first, people thought they were simply early examples of the new dollar. But later, collectors noticed that some of these early coins appeared to have enhanced details on the reverse. In particular, the eagle's tail feathers were noticeably different from those found on ordinary 2000p Sacagawea dollars. This created one of the most interesting varieties associated with the first-year coin. Not every 2000p Sacagawea dollar is a Cheerios dollar. And simply owning a 2000p coin does not mean you have one. The reverse needs to be carefully examined for the specific enhanced details associated with the variety. Why the Cheerios story became famous. The Cheerios dollar story is fascinating because it shows how a coin can become more valuable when collectors discover something that wasn't widely understood at the time. Imagine opening a cereal box around the year 2000 and finding one of these golden dollar coins. You might simply spend it. You might put it in a drawer. You might give it to your child. You might forget about it completely. Years later, collectors began studying these early coins more closely. Suddenly, something that looked like an ordinary promotional coin became a subject of serious numismatic interest. That is one reason coin collecting can be so unpredictable. Sometimes the important detail isn't obvious when the coin is first released. Another variety collectors watch for. The 2000p series also has other varieties that collectors have studied over the years. One famous example is commonly known as the wounded eagle variety. The name comes from a die gouge or mark across the eagle's breast area on certain coins. Again, this is something that should be examined carefully. Not every scratch or mark on an eagle is a wounded eagle variety. Circulation damage can create similar-looking marks. Collectors need to compare the exact characteristics with known examples before calling a coin a recognized variety. This is why good photographs and proper references are so important. What makes your coin interesting? Now look at your own 2000p Sacagawea dollar. The first thing to check is the date. You have 2000. Next, look for the mint mark. Your coin shows a P identifying Philadelphia. Then look at the overall condition. The coin in the photograph appears to have noticeable circulation and surface wear. That means we should not automatically treat it as a high-grade example. But condition is only one part of the story. The reverse should also be examined carefully for varieties. Look closely at the eagle. Study the breast area. Study the tail feathers. Look at the details of the wings. And compare what you see with reliable reference photographs. Don't clean this coin. If you think your coin may be a variety, do not clean it. This is extremely important. You might think that removing the dark surface will make the coin more valuable, but aggressive cleaning can damage the original surface. Collectors generally prefer coins that retain their natural surfaces. If the coin has dirt, discoloration, or old toning, leave it alone until you know exactly what you have. Hold it by the edges. Keep it in a safe holder, and avoid rubbing the surface. How much could a 2000p be worth? Now we come to the question everyone wants answered. How much is a 2000p Sacagawea dollar worth? For an ordinary circulated example, the answer is generally not thousands or millions of dollars. It is usually worth around its face value or a modest premium depending on condition and collector demand. But certain examples can be worth considerably more. A high-grade coin can bring a premium. A recognized variety can be more desirable. A genuine Cheerios dollar can have significantly greater collector interest. And certain major errors can also be valuable. This is why it is dangerous to give one price for every 2000p Sacagawea dollar. The exact coin matters, why condition changes everything. Imagine you have two 2000p Sacagawea dollars. Both are genuine. Both have the same date. Both came from Philadelphia. But one coin has been carried in circulation for years. It has scratches, contact marks, and worn surfaces. The other coin has been stored carefully since the year 2000. Its surfaces are much cleaner. Its details are sharp. Its original appearance is still strong. Those two coins can have very different collector values. This is why professional collectors pay so much attention to grading. A coin's grade is essentially a measurement of its condition and preservation. The better preserved the coin, the more interesting it can become to collectors. The golden dollar that wasn't gold. There is another reason people are attracted to this coin. Its color. When someone sees a Sacagawea dollar for the first time, they may wonder whether it is made from gold. It isn't. The golden appearance comes from its copper-based manganese brass-clad composition. This was a deliberate design choice. The mint wanted the new dollar to stand apart from the silver-colored coins Americans were accustomed to seeing, so that golden color became part of the coin's identity. It helped make the Sacagawea dollar instantly recognizable. A coin from the beginning of a new millennium. There is something special about the date 2000. It was the beginning of a new millennium. People around the world were talking about the future. Technology was changing rapidly. The internet was becoming part of everyday life, and the United States Mint was introducing a completely new dollar coin. So the 2000 Sacagawea dollar became connected with that moment in time. It was not just another annual coin design. It was the beginning of a new series. That is one reason first-year examples remain popular with collectors. The story hidden in your coin. When you look at this coin today, you see a worn surface. But imagine what the coin looked like when it was brand new. The golden color was bright. The details were sharp. The eagle's feathers were crisp. Sacagawea's portrait was fresh from the mint. The coin had never been carried in a pocket. It had never been dropped. It had never been scratched. It had never been forgotten inside an old box. It was simply a brand new dollar coin from the year 2000. Then time began. The coin entered the world. Someone spent it. Someone received it. Someone saved it. Someone spent it again, and eventually, decades later, it ended up being photographed and examined. That journey is impossible to reconstruct completely, but the coin itself is evidence that the journey happened. Why collectors still search for these coins? Collectors continue to look at 2000 Sacagawea dollars because the first year has several interesting varieties, and because the series itself is historically important. The Cheerios dollar created an unexpected chapter in the story. The Wounded Eagle variety created another. High-grade examples provide another collecting opportunity. And major mint errors can create additional interest. So even though millions of ordinary 2000p coins exist, collectors don't necessarily treat every example as identical. They search for the unusual ones. They study the details. They compare photographs. And sometimes they find something that other people completely missed. The most important lesson. The biggest lesson from the 2000p Sacagawea dollar is simple. Don't assume that every old coin is valuable. But don't assume that every common-looking coin is worthless either. Learn how to identify it. Learn the varieties. Learn what genuine errors look like. Learn how condition affects value. And most importantly, learn to separate real numismatic information from exaggerated internet claims. A 2000p Sacagawea dollar is not automatically a $1 million coin, but certain unusual examples can be genuinely collectible and valuable. The difference is in the details. The final look at this 2000p Sacagawea dollar. So when we look at this particular coin again, we can now see much more than a golden-colored dollar. We see a 2000 first-year Sacagawea dollar. We see the P mint mark, telling us that it was produced at Philadelphia. We see Sacagawea carrying her son. We see the words liberty and in God we trust. On the reverse, we see the American eagle surrounded by stars, with United States of America and $1. And behind all of those details is the story of a coin that was introduced at the beginning of a new millennium. It was designed to be different. It was designed to be recognizable. And it became one of the most recognizable golden-colored dollar coins in modern American coinage. Your particular coin may simply be a normal circulated 2000p example, or it may deserve a closer examination for one of the varieties associated with this fascinating first-year issue. The important thing is not to guess. Look closely. Check the reverse. Study the eagle. Examine the tail feathers. Look at the breast area. Check the condition. And never clean the coin before you know what you have. Because sometimes a coin that looks ordinary at first can tell a much more interesting story when you finally take the time to look closely. And that is what makes the 2000p Sacagawea dollar such an interesting coin. It is not just a dollar. It is the beginning of a series. It is a piece of the year 2000. It carries the image of Sacagawea. It carries the American eagle. And after more than 2 decades, it still gives collectors a reason to pick it up. Turn it over and ask one simple question. Imagine finding an old American quarter and seeing a date that appears to read 1933. At first, you might think you have simply discovered an old silver Washington quarter, but then you notice another detail, a small D mint mark. Suddenly, this is no longer an ordinary old coin. It becomes a mystery, because there is one major problem with this date. Regular Washington quarters were not produced in 1933 NGC, specifically records that no quarter dollars were coined in 1933, with Washington quarter production resuming in 1934, and that is exactly what makes the coin shown here so fascinating. Look closely at the obverse. We can see George Washington facing left. Above his portrait is the word Liberty, while In God We Trust appears beside him. At the bottom, the date appears to read 1933. Near Washington's neck, there also appears to be a D. For an ordinary collector, those details might immediately suggest a 1933 D Washington quarter. But an experienced collector would stop right there and ask a much more important question. How can this be a 1933 D Washington quarter if there was no regular Washington quarter issue in 1933? That question changes the entire story. The Washington quarter was introduced in 1932 as a coin, commemorating the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. The original plan was for the design to be a one-year commemorative issue. However, the design became popular, and when the need for additional quarters returned, the mint continued with the Washington design in 1934. The year 1933 is therefore extremely important, not because Washington quarters were produced that year, but because they were not produced. The United States was still dealing with the Great Depression. Demand for additional coinage was low, and there was no need for another quarter issue after the 1932 production. NGC's historical information confirms that no quarter dollars were produced in 1933, so when a coin appears to show the date 1933, we cannot simply take the date at face value. There are several possibilities. The date could have been altered. The coin could be counterfeit. The date could be misread because of wear or damage. The mint mark could have been manipulated, or the coin could contain some unusual characteristic that requires professional examination, and that is where this coin becomes a real collector's mystery. Why the 1933 date matters. The Washington Quarter series has a very interesting beginning. In 1932, the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints produced Washington quarters. The Denver and San Francisco issues were produced in much smaller quantities and became important key dates for collectors. The Washington quarter then disappeared from production for 1 year. That missing year was 1933. Then in 1934, production resumed. NGC lists genuine 1934 D Washington quarters, with Denver producing 3,527 200 examples that year. These early quarters were made from 90% silver and weighed 625 grams. So imagine the timeline. 1932, Washington quarter introduced. 1933, no Washington quarters produced. 1934, Washington quarter production resumes. Now place the coin shown in this video into that timeline. The apparent date is 1933. That is why the coin deserves investigation rather than a simple price estimate. The first thing every collector should do, if you own a coin like this, don't immediately search the internet for the highest price you can find. Don't immediately assume you have a fortune. And most importantly, don't clean the coin. Instead, examine it carefully. The first thing to verify is the date. Look at the numerals under magnification. Examine the edges of each digit. Look at the surrounding metal. Compare the date with photographs of genuine Washington quarters from the early 1930s. The second thing to examine is the mint mark. The letter D represents Denver on Washington quarters when present in this era. But simply seeing a D does not automatically prove that the coin was struck at Denver. A mint mark can potentially be altered or added. This is one of the reasons authentication is so important with unusual coins. If somebody wanted to create a fake rare coin, changing the date or adding a mint mark could potentially make an ordinary coin appear much more valuable. And early Washington quarters are particularly attractive targets because genuine 1932 D and signed to 32S quarters are famous key dates. The 1932 D connection. Here's where the story gets even more interesting. There really is a famous early Washington quarter from Denver. It is the 1932 D Washington quarter. NGC records the 1932D as one of the genuine early Denver issues, and the small production of the 1932D is one reason it became such an important coin for collectors. So imagine someone who doesn't know the series very well. They hear that a 1932D Washington quarter can be valuable. They find an old Washington quarter. They see what appears to be a 1933 date. They see a D. They might assume they have discovered an even rarer version. But coin collecting doesn't work that way. A coin cannot become genuine simply because the date looks rare. The date has to agree with the historical record. And according to the established record, a regular 1933 Washington quarter is missing from the series. That is the mystery. Could it be an altered coin? This is one of the possibilities that must be considered. Imagine an old Washington quarter from another year. Someone takes that coin and attempts to change the date. If the alteration is convincing enough, an inexperienced collector might believe it is an extremely rare date. The older and more worn the coin, the more difficult it can sometimes be for an inexperienced person to recognize manipulation. That is why collectors look at the entire surface rather than only the date. Does the metal around the date have the same texture as the rest of the coin? Are there unusual scratches? Does one digit appear deeper or sharper than the others? Does the surrounding surface look disturbed? Are there signs of tooling? Does the mint mark have the correct shape and placement? These questions are far more important than simply saying, "It looks rare." Could it be a counterfeit? That possibility also cannot be ignored. A counterfeit is not necessarily a modern-looking fake. Some counterfeit coins can be old themselves. Others may be made to imitate rare historical coins. A coin that appears to be a non-existent date deserves especially careful examination because the date itself creates an immediate authentication question. Collectors should also remember that even genuine silver does not automatically mean the coin is genuine. A counterfeit can potentially contain valuable metal, and an authentic silver coin can still have an altered date, so metal content alone cannot answer the mystery. The silver story. Early Washington quarters were made of 90% silver and 10% copper. Genuine 1934D examples, for example, have a standard weight of 6.25 grams and a diameter of about 24.3 millimeters. That gives us another way to investigate an unusual coin. If you have a suspected early Washington quarter, you can carefully check its weight and diameter using appropriate equipment. But again, these measurements are only part of the investigation. A coin can have the correct weight and still have an altered date. It can have the correct diameter and still be counterfeit. Professional authentication looks at many characteristics together: the metal, the dimensions, the weight, the strike, the lettering, the surfaces, the date, the mint mark, and the overall appearance of the coin. What about the value? This is probably the question most people want answered. How much could a 1933D Washington quarter be worth? The honest answer is that there is no normal market value for a genuine 1933D Washington quarter as a regular U.S. Mint issue, because the regular issue does not exist. That means we should not tell viewers that the coin is automatically worth $10,000, $50,000, $100,000, or millions of dollars. Those kinds of claims can be extremely misleading. The value depends first on determining what the coin actually is. If the date is altered, the coin will not have the value of a genuine 1933 issue. If the date is being misread and the coin turns out to be a genuine 1932D, 1934D, or another legitimate date, then its value would depend on the actual date, mint mark condition, and authenticity. And if professional examination somehow establishes an extraordinary, previously unrecognized piece, that would be a completely different situation. But until that happens, the responsible answer is, this coin needs authentication before a value can be assigned. Don't make this mistake. There is one mistake I would strongly warn every coin hunter against. Do not take a rare-looking coin and immediately clean it. Don't polish the surface. Don't rub the date. Don't scrape around the mint mark. Don't use chemicals. Don't try to make the coin look shiny. Collectors generally want original surfaces, and cleaning or damaging a potentially important coin can hurt its collector appeal. If you genuinely believe your coin may be unusual, preserve it exactly as you found it. Take clear photographs. Record its weight and dimensions if you can do so safely, then seek an experienced numismatist or professional grading and authentication service. The mystery gets deeper. Now imagine this coin sitting inside an old collection for decades. Nobody notices the date. Nobody questions the mint mark. It simply sits there with hundreds of other old coins. Then one day someone takes it out. They look at Washington's portrait. They look at liberty. They look at "In God We Trust." And then they see the date. They turn the coin over. They see the eagle. They turn it back again. They look at the date one more time. Then they notice the D. At that moment, the collector has a decision to make. Do you believe the date? Or do you believe the historical record? The answer is simple. You investigate both. Because the historical record says no regular Washington quarter was produced in 1933. Therefore, the coin has to be explained. And that is much more exciting than simply putting a price tag on it. What could this coin really be? There are several realistic possibilities. It could be a genuine Washington quarter from another year where the date has been altered. It could be a counterfeit created to imitate an early Washington quarter. It could be a damaged or worn coin whose date has been incorrectly interpreted. Or it could be something unusual that needs expert examination before anyone can make a final determination. From photographs alone, it would be irresponsible to declare the coin authentic as a 1933 D, but that does not make the coin boring. Quite the opposite. It makes it interesting. Because sometimes the most valuable lesson a coin can teach you is not how much money it is worth. Sometimes it teaches you how to recognize something that doesn't fit the historical record. A coin collector's lesson. This is why coin collecting is so much more than searching for old dates. Every coin has a story. The year tells you when it was made. The mint mark can tell you where it was made. The design tells you something about the period. The condition tells you how much use the coin experienced, and sometimes a strange detail can completely change the investigation. The Washington quarter itself tells a fascinating American story. It began as a commemorative design in 1932. It survived beyond its planned one-year issue. It disappeared for a year, and then it returned in 1934 as a regular circulating denomination. That missing year is what makes this supposed 1933 quarter so interesting. Final verdict. So what should you do if you have a coin like the one shown here? First, don't panic. Second, don't assume you're rich. Third, don't throw the coin away. And definitely don't clean it. Instead, take a very close look at the date and mint mark. If it really appears to read 1933 D, then the coin deserves professional attention because a regular 1933 Washington quarter is not listed among the normal Washington quarter issues. The most important fact to remember is this. 1933 is the missing year in the early Washington quarter series. There were Washington quarters in 1932. There were Washington quarters again in 1934. But there was no regular Washington quarter production in 1933, and that is why this coin should not be presented simply as another rare quarter. It should be presented as a mystery that begins with one small date, 1933, a date that seems to appear on a coin that, according to the historical record, should not exist. Maybe the explanation is an altered date. Maybe it is a counterfeit. Maybe the date is being misread. Or maybe professional examination will uncover something that cannot be determined from photographs alone. But until the coin is authenticated, one thing is certain. Don't sell it based on a guess, and don't believe an exaggerated price claim based only on the date. Verify first. Authenticate second. Value third. And that is the real lesson behind this mysterious 1933 Washington quarter, because sometimes the most fascinating coin in your collection isn't the one with the highest price. It is the one that makes you stop, look twice, and ask,